William Eddy, class of 1949, is a true pioneer in the world of wildlife conservation, and his involvements with the environment has spanned 4 decades and 5 continents. In addition to teaching in the environmental program at the University of Vermont for 22 years, he's held positions with the New York Zoological Society, the Conservation Foundation, the African Wildlife Foundation, and the U.S. National Park Service. Over the past 40 years, he has made at least 25 trips to Africa, where he has developed public awareness programs devoted to the conservation of wildlife in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. In the 1980s, the U.S. Peace Corps invited him to help establish training programs to increase environmental understanding in a number of Central American, Caribbean, and African countries. His work as a consultant with the U.S. Park Service involved him in a variety of projects in India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. As a filmmaker, he has made several documentaries for the Park Service, as well as a number of Swahili language films on wildlife conservation that have been seen by millions of people throughout East Africa. And he has authored numerous books, including his most recent entitled The Other Side of the World, Essays and Stories on Mind and Nature. William Eddy.
I've reached that point when written words make a much greater cogency of thought than those retrieved directly from memory. Actually, sometimes the recalled words make no sense whatsoever, even to the speaker. Today, such gaps in the exchange of ideas are referred to euphemistically as senior moments. It's a very slippery slope. To try to avoid some of them, I ask your forbearance while I read my few comments as written. Sitting here listening to a splendid introduction to someone I don't believe I've ever met prompts me to think of last year's medal winners. Debbie Lapine, who is Brooks Vale's assistant here in the Alumni Relations Office, she's been so helpful in organizing this occasion and very kindly sent me an internet link showing some videos of last year's medalists. Two of them described perfectly their response on first learning that they were winners of the medal, that disquieting feeling of anxiety that the award might not be real, or even worse, that perhaps the college had made a mistake in the selection process. Several of them referred to this feeling as the imposter syndrome. And it was a great comfort to me to share that same feeling with them. In my case, a phone call came in at noontime several months ago. This is the time of day that in our household we are most vulnerable to fundraising phone calls. Is this Bill Eddy? The voice asked. With some hesitation, I acknowledged his presence and mine. My name is Adam Falk, he said. There was a short pause. President-elect of Williams College, he added. I hesitated again. Are you raising money, I asked? I'm calling to tell you that you have been chosen as one of the year's Bicentennial Medal winners. I could feel the imposter syndrome begin to take root and grow vigorously, and it was only due to Adam Falk's graciousness and repeated reassurances that I finally accepted that his call was not some new fundraising ploy. A decade ago, after so much time spent traveling and working overseas, often in very remote parts of the world and among very different cultures, I wanted to put some distance between myself and those experiences so I could see them more clearly. And the only way I could really do that was to write a book. The result was a small collection of essays called The Other Side of the World. It was subtitled Essays and Stories on Mind and Nature. The main title makes the book sound like a travelogue, which it isn't. The subtitle suggests something else, Essays and Stories on Mind and Nature. So instead of talking with you about distant places in my environmental work with wildlife conservation, I'd like to share with you a few ideas from one of those essays. The subject is very close to home, as it is something that Williams College has been doing especially well for over 200 years. Most commonly, we refer to it as education, but I prefer for this occasion another metaphor, the dance between learning and ignorance. The essay is very short. It has a rather dull title, written in a dead language. It is called De Docta Ignorantia. A few sentences from the book's introduction should help provide a map of where we're going. This is from the introduction to the book. Over time, and with the evolution of human consciousness structured by language, the world became polarized, albeit gradually, into the it that appears to be outside of me and the I that appears to be inside. Thus, the advent of human consciousness and the correlative growth of language created for the first time what might be described as both an outside to nature as well as an inside. Despite the tenacity of popular belief to the contrary, neither can exist without the other. If there is any theme or concern that these essays share in common, it is in various guises this one, that the mind is, in reality, the other side of the world. De docta ignorantia. Some time ago, I was invited to speak to a group of elementary school teachers who were beginning a 3-week training program at the University of Vermont. They were part of a project being undertaken by university faculty from the departments of chemistry, physics, and geology, designed to help teachers of the very young to introduce their students to the sciences. I began by saying that I always found it difficult to talk to a group of people whom I did not know and who did not know me. It meant, I told them, that we shared no common frame of reference. For example, I said, the words I am using may be familiar to all of us, but for each of us their meanings may be different. Consider a word like nature. To what does it refer? Trees and sky, lions, wolves, bats? What about dragons and unicorns? Well, they aren't part of nature, you say. They only exist in the imagination. Is the human imagination a part of nature? What about cities and computers? No, they're man-made. Well, what about a vegetable garden? Is that man-made? Does nature itself have any environment, I asked. In other words, is there anything not contained in nature? If there is nothing that isn't nature, then how can we identify what it is as different from something else? Usually a container like a box is clearly separate from the things it contains. These are not easy questions to resolve, I said, but they do illustrate that we could talk about nature for some time before we realize that we each might be talking about something quite different. So in short, I said, I don't know what you know, and I don't know what you don't know. But then, of course, neither do you. It seems like such an obvious fact that we can't be aware of what we're not aware of. But how difficult it is to understand. As one writer has said, our consciousness is like a flashlight in a dark room. To ask it to reveal something on which there is no light shining is meaningless. So our ignorance remains in the dark, and we remain unconscious of it. As we learn more, our consciousness casts its light on objects in the room that we hadn't seen before. And gradually we may become dimly aware not only that our ignorance is vast, but the room itself is infinite. One man who saw this problem so clearly and expressed it so well was Nicholas of Cusa. Cusa was the Latinized name of the tiny German village of Quais, where he was born in 1401. Nicholas was a man for all seasons. He attended the universities of Heidelberg, Rome, Padua, and Cologne. He became a bishop in the Catholic Church. He was fascinated by astronomy and mathematics and pursued the study of botany and optics. Good medalist, potentially. It was Nicholas who concluded that the universe, like God, had a circumference that was nowhere and a center that was everywhere. In 1440, he wrote of these ideas in a little book titled De docta ignorantia. A translation of that Latin title might be On Learned Ignorance, or it might be On Learned Ignorance. For Nicholas of Cusa, it apparently meant both. The ignorance that grows from increased knowledge is an ignorance that we become aware of only as we learn. The brilliant physicist who, after a lifetime of research, has become aware of the limits of his own knowledge, has learned his own ignorance. And insofar as he is aware of it, his may be a learned ignorance as well, in the sense that a learned person is wise, something more than just well-educated. I've lost my place. Here we go. Such ignorance may well be worth striving for. It is quite different from the garden variety of ignorance. the unlearned type that simply comes from not knowing. We see it in the arrogance of politicians or in that tendency towards certainty in so many middle-aged males. It is revealed in the swagger of the 18-year-old with the automatic rifle. We hear it in the cry that says freedom and doing what you want are synonymous. It was best said on a bumper sticker I saw recently. It read, "The best substitute for experience is being 16. It reminded me that one good reason for the slow pace of human progress may be that each generation must learn the particular dimensions of its own ignorance. That is the daunting task of teachers. Thus the ends of De Docta Ignorantia. I came to Williams College as a freshman 65 years ago this November. I was 17 years old. The Second World War had just ended. Sitting next to me in my European history course was an American Army officer completing his college degree under the GI Bill of Rights. He was 35 years old with a wife and 3 children. As a way to ensure the greatest continuity in academic standards, all freshman courses were routinely taught by senior faculty or department chairmen. And the college then reinstituted the notorious comprehensive examination at the end of senior year for any major. I majored in English, and I was responsible for the content of every course in English that I'd taken in the 4 years of college to be tested on in a 5-hour exam at the end of my senior year. Talk about the dance between ignorance and learning. During the next 4 years, I was exposed to what I called later on an entirely new environment of thought. It consisted of a series of offerings by a remarkable faculty who enabled, cajoled, demanded, inspired, promoted, and finally graduated us with my world turned upside down and inside out. I am conscious of the debt owed to that faculty. They were the best models a young man could have had who wanted to become a teacher. I made a point of trying to say this to each of them before I left. We hear today a great deal about the rising cost of education and the priority to cut budgets throughout the system. I think we need to be reminded of that other soundbite that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. I would like to thank Williams College for the distinct honor that it has given the 5 of us today, along with the Bicentennial Medals. And I would especially like to thank Adam Falk and to congratulate him on becoming the 17th president of Williams College. We wish him Godspeed. I urge him to call me at any time if he's around the area, but preferably around noontime. He will be most welcome if he comes by, even if he's fundraising. Thank you.